Welcome to the Intentional Teacher Podcast. I am your host, Lauren Monique, and I have a special guest on the podcast with me today. She is a previous member of Intentional Teaching. She is very wise. I don't know if she considers herself to be, but I consider her to be very wise and just such a kind and loving teacher. And I am so thrilled to have Jacynthe on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited
Yeah.
to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. So how about we get started? Let us know, or let the listeners know where and what you teach.
So I am a primarily grade 1 and grade 2 French teacher. I teach extended French at, I'm sorry, I made a mistake.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, editing.
You can start it again.
Nerves. All right, I'm good. Can I reset?
Yeah,
okay.
Totally.
Perfect. So I teach primarily grade 1 and 2 French in Ottawa. I also teach social studies and a little bit of grade 6 health and phys ed.
I did not know that you were teaching grade 6 this year.
It was a surprise for me.
How are you finding it? Because Jacynthe and I have known each other for a little while, and Jacynthe has always taught primary and not so much of the intermediate middle grades. How are you finding grade 6 this year?
I feel like I'm a new teacher because this is the subject that's completely new for me. So I feel like a first year teacher again, and I'm going to find resources to my colleagues. I'm like, what are all those things I did my first year that I can do now? And go back and I go, okay, find colleagues who can help me, look for resources, see what's there too. Don't reinvent the wheel. And it's really helped. We have a really supportive staff at my school too, and it's been wonderful. So still feel like a new teacher again, but learning as we go and realizing that grade 6 is a lot more challenging, but I'm happy to take it and I like to roll with it.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, because I mean, I really like middle grades, but it's not for everybody. Not everyone likes that range. So that's awesome that you're able to roll with it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about, let's go back. So Jacynthe, I don't actually remember when we met. It's been a little while. How about take us back to before we started working together, and before you started working with me in intentional teaching. I would love to hear a little bit about what brought you there. And we're also going to talk to you today because Jacynthe has had some amazing wins and some amazing strategies that have worked well for you. But we're also this episode is going to be a little bit different because we're also going to talk a little bit about what you can do when you've got the habits that are working for you and you're kind of thrown a curveball, like teaching grade 6, and you want to get back on to those strategies. So this is going to be a little bit of a different episode, which I'm very excited for. But how about we go back a little bit so that the teachers who are listening can connect a little bit with you. Where were you when we first met? What kind of prompted you to join intentional teaching?
What prompted me to join intentional teaching was actually seeing things on Instagram and trying to find new resources to just inspiration to keep me inspired and how can I change what I'm teaching. But also I was trying to prepare for my performance appraisal. In my school board, we have one every 5 years. So I figured, okay, my performance appraisal is coming. I'd like to be the most prepared teacher that I can be ready, be the most well-rounded I can be at that point. And so when I stumbled upon the intentional teaching program, I said, this is wonderful. This will get me on the right path. I'll be able to have these ideas, be more organized, or be just learning from somebody else, finding other approaches to what I do and just hearing from another person. And I love that you have a community of teachers, and that really helped as well. And different schools, different perspectives. I found that it was a big part of what helped too.
Yeah, that's the thing I love about it, is being able to hear from other teachers. Because I'll be honest, one of the things that I was reluctant when I even started doing this is I thought, like, well, who am I to give teachers advice and suggestions? Like, I'm just another teacher. And I mean, of course, I have different training and coaching and things like that, but I think we all have those kinds of experiences. But when I kind of got the idea of, instead of feeling like I need to be the guru, I'm more a contributor. And I think we can really contribute to the conversation, like from with all sorts of teachers, and hear from different teachers in the actual program. So I love that that was one of the things that you liked about it, that having that community and hearing from different perspectives and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed that, just hearing other people's ideas and people saying, "Hey, I go through this too, and it's not just at your school; it's in my city too. It's in my country." And I think of some of our friends who are in the States as well, that we've worked with, and in all of the groups that actually we've done. Because I've done a few programs with you now.
Yeah, and there are usually, and it's so amazing to hear like the wide range of educational systems and perspectives. And you usually only know where you teach, and to hear different perspectives and different challenges that they're going through and things like that. So yeah, so that sounds great. Because I would say, knowing Jacynthe is already has a lot of routines and organization in place, and it sounds like you wanted to um kind of get ready for your teacher appraisal and feel as well-rounded as you could. So I'd love to hear, because we've talked about this before, what are some of the things that you found helpful? Because I always like, for those of you who are listening, if you're listening, I love for you to have like an idea or something that you can take away from an episode, so that you can use it in your own teaching, so that it can be really practical and helpful for you. So I'd love to hear from Jacynthe. What's maybe one strategy that you found helpful that you've been using?
I found what was the most helpful was actually planning out my planning time. And it sounds silly when you say it that way. You say, "Oh, I'm planning out my planning time." But really, taking that time in the morning, and I still do it Monday morning, I'll sit at my desk and I have a laminated version, knowing myself, laminated, color coded with what day and when my prep time is. But then I fill out and I go, okay, what is something I need to do every day? Definitely checking and responding to emails, especially sometimes there's things pressing in the morning that happen before school. Um, Knowing when I'm going to batch my photocopies, which is another thing, was batching and putting things together. I was doing some of that, but just adding and planning it made a big difference as well. But definitely being able to maximize it. I found that I would end up sitting, twiddling my thumbs and being like, well, what am I doing? And then I go, well,
Mm-hmm.
no, I have to call a parent. I have a meeting. I have to make my photocopies. I need to plan my week ahead. And I find I fly by the seat of my pants, and it's not always the way to go. It can be in some ways. I find we, as teachers, we definitely roll with the punches and the way things go, but also it's good to even just have a bare bones plan of what am I doing. So just that planning time, planning my planning time, and making room for marking and taking less home has been the biggest change.
That's so awesome. And yeah, planning, because that's not something that I had to learn that the hard way, for sure. I hadn't heard of that strategy for a while when I taught. And because there are just so many things that we have to do, like photocopies and marking and emailing back to this parent, and like somebody comes to talk to you, like your day can just be hijacked. And I hear from teachers sometimes that tell me like, oh, well, I can't do anything about it. This is just how it goes. And yeah, we definitely have interruptions and things change, but I think when you start to look at how you can spend your time, because it's so limited, when we've planned it out in advance or we have an idea of what we need to be doing, it really avoids what I call mental negotiation. So like deciding, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? You can just get right into it.
I definitely agree with that. It may not always work, and there are interruptions. There's even some today, and I'm like, well, scratch that off my plans. But it meant too that I still knew, okay, this is what's still left, and I can shift some of it to my time on Thursday or on Friday. And so there's room. And if not, like today being Thursday, I know I have a full block tomorrow. Okay, this is a thing, and I prioritize. And that was another thing we had talked about, was prioritizing your needs and the things that you have to get done. So I
Mm-hmm.
would prioritize and go, okay, this absolutely needs to be done. I have a deadline for right now, and an incentive for a French performance at our school. It has to be done by tomorrow. These were the last things I was looking to get lined up. Made my phone calls today, which was not in my plans, but definitely needs to be done. That way tomorrow I can finish up my work by the deadline and we're good to go.
Totally. And I think too, when it comes to priorities, I think a lot of us think like, oh, I just have too many priorities. But if you can find ways to find the absolute must priorities, that can make a big difference too, so that you're not trying to decide all the time.
Definitely. It reminds me of one of the tables you had showed us. It was like, is it urgent and important?
Hmm.
That too, just those four quadrants, even just thinking back at it, I go, okay, is it urgent and important? It may be urgent, but it's not important, or it is important, it is urgent. And just prioritizing by that sometimes was just enough to go, okay, this needs to be done today, but that can go tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing too that I wanted to highlight about what Jacynthe said is that you will look at your day, because sometimes teachers start to plan out their time. And I have a guide on this. You can take a look. We will link it up in the show notes, called the Intentional 10. But one challenge that sometimes people say, well, I started planning out my time, Lauren, but something happened and I just got derailed. But the habit that I love that you have is like, you'll look and see your day and say, okay, this changed. So I'm going to tweak this and I'm going to put this over here and I'm going to move it around. Because what I've noticed is a lot of us tend to be in the doing all the time. Like, you get to school, and this was me, like I got to school and I would just hit the ground running and try and get as much done as I possibly can. And I would be helping people all day. And there wasn't really any time where I took a step back and decided what I was actually going to spend my time on. And what you just said is so important, is to think about, like, before you just jump into the doing, is looking strategically on how you're going to be spending your time, because that will make a big difference if you're looking to do less work at home.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
100%.
Like metacognition, like thinking about your thinking, it's like you're thinking about what you're going to be doing.
The brain
Totally.
dump too. The brain dump was a huge thing. And
Oh,
I find
awesome.
that's what I do, like right when I come in on the Monday or even on the weekend sometimes I'll go, okay, what is coming up that I need to look at? Actually, we have a fantastic principal who sends us an email on the weekend, says it's only one, and it's just more, here's a look ahead at the week. And you could read it Monday morning if you'd like as well. But it's just for us. It's a heads up that says, hey, here's what's coming. We have a spirit day. There's a performance then. Like today, there was a tournament in our gym. So the gym was closed, but it just lets us know. And then too, you can plan around it. Because as a grade 6 teacher and I teach gym, if I taught gym today, I would have to plan around knowing that I don't have access to the gym today. So, am I taking them outside? Are we doing some sort of DPA in the classroom? What are we doing? On Monday, it was the girls floorball tournament. And I turned around and went, well, I'd like an extra mark in dance. Okay, that's another thing I teach. I can do that. So still by the seam of my pants, but still looking at, well, this is what was said to us, and this is how I can go from there.
Yeah. And to me, I don't know. I mean, maybe you feel like you're flying by the seat of your pants, but that sounds like you had some forethought there. A
Maybe a
little bit.
little.
A little bit. So I wanted to touch base with you about, you were talking about what can we do if, like, if we're thrown a curveball or if things change and we had these habits that were really supporting us and we've kind of fallen off, or something's changed, or we want to get back into them. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I find this year is not the same as last year. And even last year, like I found I was exhausted and I talked to my colleagues and we would be the same. And I remember even in the group that we were in, we were all saying like we're tired. And
Mm-hmm.
I find this year is like a different kind of energy. And it's like I'm always busy, I'm always on the go. And even any of my other colleagues I talked to, we're all like, we're on the go, it never ends.
Mm-hmm.
And so those habits that I had, they fell by the wayside. I even had like like a working to-do list that I keep having, and I have a whiteboard in front of my desk, a magnetic whiteboard, and it has like a working to-do list that I can constantly change the whiteboard marker. And it still had things from September that I just erased. And I'm like, goodness, like it's December. Those should have been gone though.
Yeah.
But little things like that fall off the wayside. I'm not gonna lie, my day plans fell 2 months behind. And I said, I know what I've done. I have my own strategies. I work with booklets. It's kind of part of how I batch my photocopies is I teach using booklets and themes. And when I do, then I always keep a master copy for myself that I use to model. and I'll mark what day I've done it on. So
Mhm.
that way I know for my own marks and my own points when I go back, I go, all right, what did I do on December 6th? Well, I know we were working on the continents and a map of the world. And I know that's in my booklet. So I can take it home, go through. I always keep a master copy, especially teaching primary modeling. Everything you're teaching, it helps them. And I find they're less lost and they can follow, and then you get your little keen friends who are like, this continent is this and I can see it, and they'll look to you for their book and look for the same thing. So I find it helps. It's a good strategy. I'm a big fan of document cameras. Our
Mhm.
school was given some years ago, and mine stopped working, and I said, you know what, I want another one. If only I could. There's no I don't get any financial kickbacks from this, but I'm a big fan of like the IPVO document cameras. They're a similar version to what we were given in the past, and it's such a big part of my day. I can project with what we're working on. The students can see me model. It's the same thing I do for journals, but um, regardless, just fall off the horse. And that's part of the things that I had forgotten about was, hey, what about all of those things that I didn't document that I did? Or
Mhm.
I've had meetings or parent teacher interviews, and I used to have like a list of this is the parent, this is the phone number, this is what I need. And I had it this year, but not in the way that I would have wanted. I was like, it's okay. I have this. Here's the date. Here's how we go. So all of these good habits that I had built up, like the intentional 10 and taking my time on Mondays and, planning out my planning time for the week. Um, Doing brain dumps, I would end up just, mentally venting in the car to my poor husband, who's such a good listener. But I'd be venting on the phone with him and saying, I have this and this and this to do. And I'm like, oh, goodness. Or this meeting, or you take on more responsibilities and then other things fall by the wayside. That too. That's something that I did this year that was new. I became a teacher mentor. So we have a new teacher program
Mhm.
in Ottawa and in our board. It's called the New Teacher Induction Program. And I had one of my colleagues who's actually a student teacher himself who asked me to be his mentor. I said, yes, I would love to. And I decided on top of that, hey, let's add on to that plate. Let's add on being a union rep. Let's add that. We've never done that before.
Know
Let's
what else
add
I can
on.
add to my plate?
What else can I add to my plate?
Yeah.
We're hoping to get a program for autistic kids going. And I'm like, oh, yep, I volunteer for that. Add me on there too.
Oh, I
Part
have
of
some ideas. I have some ideas. Okay.
so
So, and
anyways, it's a lot, but part of it too is realizing how full your plate is and just taking a step back and looking.
well, I love that you've even identified how full your plate is. And if you are listening and you can relate to what Jacynthe is saying, I'm sure many people can, because I hear this a lot, because it's because you care and you want to help others, and that's why you became a teacher in the first place, right?
Exactly.
And so the first thing that I would say is to identify the problem, because sometimes we get so caught up in the symptoms of the problem, which is I have this to do and that to do, and I'm overwhelmed and I can't get everything done, and it's not to the level that I usually have it at. And those are kind of the symptoms, but they're not the actual problem itself. So what do you think is the true problem, or the thing that made the shift for you, that changed the game?
The true problem that sort of had me fall off the horse,
Mm-hmm.
I think, was um, just my priorities shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't prioritizing the way that I wanted to and that I should have, fully aware of the calendar and the position that I have.
Yeah. And
That's
I
probably the biggest thing.
And I think those things can be, they take a while to actually show up, and it can be small. It's kind of like, almost like, I think of it as like erosion, like a little pebble here and there we don't notice, but it's like over and over and over. Then things can be eroded, and then you can like find yourself, because I've totally experienced this, where it's like, what, I was doing okay, and now my schedule feels out of control again. Like, what's going on? And
Big
so
time.
it sounds to me like maybe that's a lot of what it is, and the priorities piece. And maybe you have more responsibilities than you have in the past.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Just a couple,
Just a few.
just a
Okay.
few.
So a couple things I would say is the first, going forward, before anyone asks you to do something, what do you say if someone asks you to be part of a committee? What do you usually say?
Let me think about
Nice.
it.
She's remembered. So that would be the first thing, if you're listening to this too, is whenever someone asks you to do something, don't say yes right away. Always give yourself a time to think about it if it does reflect your own priorities. So you can say, that sounds awesome, whatever it is. Would be love to participate. Let me just check my calendar and I'll get back to you. So that would be the first thing. It sounds like you're already doing that. Yeah.
I'm trying.
You're trying.
Work,
So
work in progress.
we'll remember that. The next thing I would say is, when we're looking at your priorities and you have these different levels of responsibilities, my thinking from what I'm hearing from you is, maybe now that you have more on your plate, we need to simplify or lower the expectation or the level to which you feel like you should be doing everything.
Yeah,
What do you
that
think?
seems fair.
Yeah, because it doesn't sound like it's necessarily the kids in this situation. It's just like the sheer amount that you have.
It's a bit of both. And that's the other part that I didn't mention is the group of students I have this year. There are some where there are very high needs,
Mm-hmm.
and where, especially at the beginning of the year, I probably spent an hour and a half every night just documenting from the day, because in the moment I couldn't document,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a lot to do, and it would only be about 3 children, and it
Yeah.
was so much extra documentation. And part of why we were doing it was to make sure, to even just hope that we could get extra support, really, because that's the goal in the end. And even I find in my core as a teacher is to reach every child in a way that I can help them succeed. And so it's hard to do that when, they're struggling, or they're having there maybe a crisis, or there's something that's not diagnosed that we don't know about,
Mm-hmm.
or where they're on a new medication. There's a lot that we need to know, and documentation is key at that point. But also it meant that I had to do it in the moment, was not possible, so I had to do it in the evening. Or I guess I could have done it during my planning time, but what if it happens fourth block, was my question. Is, well, what if it happens at the end of the day? How do I reach that?
Yeah,
When do
totally.
I do it? And when you're exhausted from the day.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is that I think really at the bottom of it is that you have so many different competing priorities. And I'm wondering, do you have, when you look at your time, do you have a moment in your day where you're still looking at your top priorities and what you're going to be focusing in on?
Hopefully during my planning time.
Yeah. What about like overall for your week?
I try to do that in the morning when I get in.
Yeah.
I try to look
Awesome.
at, okay, where am I? What do I need to do today? How am I going to get there?
And then, so what I'm thinking then, because I think you already have a lot of the habits, and partially it's just that you just do have more things on your plate, and that's and that's okay. We can live in seasons where we purposely help more people. And we know that when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, right? So you've said yes to supporting other people in your life, and you've said no to maybe having it to the degree that you'd like to, or maybe you've said no to other things in your life. So you need to make sure that you kind of carve out time for yourself, for example. So saying yes to something means saying no to something else. Would you agree?
100% agree. And you said that, and I went, oh, that reignited all of those things that I remember. I'm like, saying yes to something means saying no to something else. And I remember saying that to my mom the other day too. And I said, I remember this.
Yeah, right. And I think that's a hard one, because I think we just want to say yes to everything because we want to help. And it's not that we can help as much as there's lots that we can do, but if we say yes to everything, sometimes we literally don't have the space in our day. So that would be the one thing that I would think about. And one thing that I've learned recently that I think might be helpful for you is, do you feel like, did you sign up for all of these things because you really truly wanted to, or you didn't want to disappoint somebody?
That's hard. Um, some of it is because I liked it. Like the CRUC program, which is an after-school program for autistic children,
Mhm.
is something that I loved doing last year and I found fulfilling. And so when they said, "Hey, we might have a chance at having it," I right away said, "I want to volunteer. I'd like to do it." But two, it's hard. I'm a yes person. I
Mhm.
don't like disappointing others, and that's sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow.
Mhm.
It's you don't want to disappoint, you don't want to, you know, just you feel like you hurt them and it's not the truth. It's those
Yeah.
thoughts that you have in your head while you're like, I'm going to say no. And what if they really depend on me? What if they need me?
Mhm. Because it comes from such a good place, right? So that would be the thing that I would watch from now on, is making sure, getting some accountability, that you make sure you're always looking at your priorities. What are you going to give lesser effort to? What are you going to, how could you streamline it, add a little bit of a routine or a system, which I think you're already doing, making sure that you have time, that you're looking at how you're prioritizing during your day. But also in terms of your mindset and how you're thinking about it, is one thing that really struck home for me that I heard a few weeks ago, was when we when we have a fear of disappointing others, right? Which I don't want to disappoint other people. Oftentimes, to avoid disappointing other people, we disappoint ourselves. And so sometimes, if we disappoint somebody else, and it's a small thing, they might be disappointed for a little while and they get over it. But if we're always disappointing ourselves, that can add up and add up and add up. So that's kind of helped me get a perspective on it, where I can say, would this be a big thing? Would this really be upsetting for them? Like, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to help the person that I care about, the person at school that I need to help. Like, it's worth it for me to put my needs on the back burner. Or is it just that I'm afraid of the uncomfortable feeling of them feeling disappointed? Am I willing to feel that discomfort, but still make sure that I'm not always the one who's disappointed every time?
It's a hard thing to accept, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's necessary.
I agree.
Definitely. It doesn't help too that even like in my personal life things have changed. I was actually just recently diagnosed with ADHD,
Mm,
and that was something that I sort of had in my mind probably the last year or so, but I had seen an article, but two, it had that article just sort of set something off in my mind and I went, wait a minute, I experienced that and this and
mm-hmm.
this and also that and this wandering thought and this. And it made me realize, okay, this might be my new truth. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just like another thing to recently just add on to my plate is having these conversations with my doctor and looking for somebody to do a psychological assessment. Thinking of the potential of starting medication. It's just all these other things that you add on to your plate, and you go, okay, how too is it gonna change how I am as a teacher? Does it change just my prioritizing? It makes me realize things too in the sense that some of that procrastination that I'm sure we're guilty of, we're all guilty of at
Mm-hmm.
some point, but that procrastination part, is it because the task is too mentally daunting, or was there something that I didn't realize that I had, or I'm still learning. There's a lot of like what ifs or how or when, but just a little side note, but definitely when things change in your life too, how can you use it to your advantage and move forward?
Mm-hmm. And well, first off, I wanted to thank you for sharing that with us, because I have heard from so many teachers in our age group or a little bit older who were not diagnosed when they were in school, because especially for women, I've had male teachers as well who have shared that with me, but especially for women, it's not always as obvious, quote unquote. So you don't get diagnosed as a kid and you just think that this is normal, like, or the challenges that you're facing. And then we're hit with it when we're adults. So do you know Mel Robbins?
Yes, I do.
Do you know she has ADHD?
No,
She does.
well, it is wonderful.
She shares about it. So I would listen because I find it really amazing. I think it's really empowering to hear from other people. I've had a few coaches who have had ADHD and how they work with it in their lives, and they can be, and like, they're amazing. So that's the first thing I would say. And the other is to recognize, like, that, yeah, you're going through, like, oh, like, there's this whole new, like, realm of decision making, like, should I do this? And it's a learning curve and all of this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I guess, is to think about, if my child had ADHD, I would want them to have an experience with a teacher who has ADHD too, or who has a neurodivergence or whatever it is, in this case, ADHD, because you're going to understand that child so much more. Like, I think it's so important and so amazing that teachers are starting to recognize that, because it's just going to help you empathize and understand kids who may not, like, think as the way that we're, like, quote unquote, that's not neurodivergent. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
I would want that as a parent.
You know what? I think it's true, and I would agree with that. I'm not a parent, but I'm an aunt to five, and I have a nephew who is autistic and also has ADHD. And I think even just having that experience, and him being exposed to somebody else who is actually his father is.
Hmm.
So his dad can use his own strategies and things that have helped him that he can instill in his son.
Yeah.
But definitely that's a whole other conversation. But just it's a change that I've had, happen in my life now, not just the diagnosis, and how it's actually affected like my own perspective, and how I can actually use it as like a superpower, and
Hmm.
not a detriment to my career and my own life.
Yeah, because really you've always had it. And this way now you maybe will pick up a few other strategies and be maybe more self-compassionate towards yourself. But you might also be able to tap into strengths that you didn't realize you had. Because that's the thing I've noticed, is like what I call, like, the zone of genius, or our superpowers, our strengths. We don't realize that they're strengths of ours, because they come naturally to you and you don't necessarily know, right? So now that you have this awareness, you can tap more into the things that you really can do well, that you may not have known before.
Like hyper focusing is
Yeah,
actually an advantage,
absolutely.
especially if you're marketing. If you can hyper focus on your marketing, I find it becomes muscle memory, not only because you're, doing it over and over again, but also you sort of kind of tune out the outside
Mhm.
world. Or even I'll use, like, if I'm at home, I'll use Netflix, or if I'm at school, I'll turn on just like background music, and I find it's what I've called white noise, which I've learned later is ADHD.
Mhm.
But it helped me focus, because then I wouldn't hear, like, the kids in the hallway, or I wouldn't be encouraged to try to use my phone. I'd have something else for like my ears to focus on, so that I could then hyper focus on my marking and just check, check, check. And I'd look at the clock, and I'm like, it's only been 45 minutes and I've completed my entire class.
Absolutely. Like, and we'll end on this note, but
Mhm.
my sister-in-law was an educator as well. And now she does these really amazing, like, I should bring her on the podcast, these really amazing, big, big virtual events for schools and, like, different learning opportunities. And she started it during COVID, but she has ADHD and she could, like, hyper focus and create so much amazing experiences for students because of her ability to hyper focus.
It's wonderful. So it's a superpower.
Yeah.
Everybody has one, to be honest.
Hmm.
It definitely, we all have our zones of genius, and it's for you to tap into it. And definitely, if you've fallen off the horse, give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Realize it. Don't wallow in the fact that, um, you've lost your good habits, because they're always there. They're just sort of put on the back burner. And now you're realizing I can refocus, I can reprioritize, and I'm going to get back there. Definitely
And
give yourself the grace.
mhm. And it's really about that awareness, like you're noticing it. And usually it's because either we've taken on more responsibilities at school, or we have an extra challenging year, or something happened in our personal lives. And just to be like showing yourself that grace, like you said, and then noticing your thoughts, like noticing those thoughts that you're having, and like how can you show yourself grace that it's okay, you can come back to it. I think it's huge. So I love that you're already looking at that and thinking about what you can do differently, because yeah, it happens to everybody.
We're not alone. You're not
Totally.
alone. We're all going through this, and it's just for you to realize that it's okay, that you just need to get back on and just face forwards.
Totally. And like failure, quote unquote, is always going to happen. And it's more about like your comeback rate. So everyone's going to have moments where they fall off. Like that's so normal and everyone experiences it. It's more about how fast can you get back on it? What strategies? Who can you call? Who can you talk to? What kind of accountability can you bring in? Whatever you need so that you can get back on. It's not about falling off. It's about getting back on and having strategies to get back onto it.
Exactly. I feel like there's a quote about, it doesn't matter how many times, you fall off the bike, or it's the fact that you get back on and that you continue.
Totally. Absolutely. Well, Justine, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so lovely to have you. I'm thrilled you were able to join us today.
Thank you for having me. I've really had a great time.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would add to call this episode complete?
Um, Maybe just a little reminder. Find what works for you with your students, and get into it. Find what makes you happy. I
Mm-hmm.
found just singing songs with my primaries is something not only that I love from my love of music, but I find I see their joy in it. So find what not only makes you you, but that you can keep that and give it to your students.
Totally, because then you can bring more joy into the classroom because it starts with you.
It does. I 100% agree. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.